3 years ago, if you had told me that a 20-minute phone call would save me tens of thousands of dollars and 2 decades of debt repayment, I would have thought you were crazy. But that's exactly what happened to me. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I'm paying off my $48,000 in debt in only 4.5 years. But first, I'm going to walk you through two popular debt repayment methods that you can do on your own. And at the end, I'm going to talk about 3 fears that kept me from making that life-changing phone call years sooner. So if you're in debt right now and you're feeling stuck, this one's for you. Let's start with a quick run through of the basics because these two debt repayment methods come up in almost every debt conversation. First is the snowball method. With this debt repayment strategy, you start by paying off your smallest debt first, regardless of the interest rate. Then, once that first debt is paid off, you roll the money that you were using to pay off that debt into the next one. This isn't the fastest method mathematically, but it can provide a bit more motivation to keep going because it can give you quick wins. The second popular repayment strategy is the avalanche method. With this method, you pay off the debt with the highest interest rate first, and then move on to the second highest, and so on. This method saves you the most money in interest over time, but progress can feel a bit slower than with the snowball method, which can make it harder to stick with for some people because you don't get those little wins early on. So let's take a look at what these methods would look like in action. Let's say I have a credit card with a $10,000 balance that has a 29.99% interest rate, and I'm making a $250 payment on it each month. Say I also have a line of credit with a $5,000 balance and an 8% interest rate that I'm making $85 a month payments to. And finally, let's say I have a second credit card with a $5,000 balance, and that one's at 15% interest, and I'm paying $130 a month to that one. Now, if we look over here at the side, you can see that with the current payments I'm making, it would take me 325 months in order to be able to be debt-free. And in total, this $20,000 that I currently owe would end up costing me $94,315. But if we look down to the avalanche method, paying the same amount of money per month, but using this strategy, it would take me 92 months to become debt-free, and that $20,000 would cost me $42,520. And then if we look at the snowball method, it would be 94 months to pay off the debt, so 2 months more than the avalanche, and it would cost me $43,145 in total. So from this, you can see the avalanche method would save 2 months and $625. However, if we look at the very bottom option, the debt repayment program, this is what I chose to do, and in this example, my monthly payments would only be $367, and it would only take me 55 months to become debt-free, and that $20,000 would only cost me $20,000. This debt repayment program option is what I was referring to at the beginning of the video when I said a 20-minute phone call saved me tens of thousands of dollars and 2 decades of debt repayment. So you may be wondering how I took advantage of this option. Well, before I was able to enter into a debt repayment program, I first had to reach out to a credit counselor. The beauty of this is that with credit counseling, it opens the doors to multiple possible solutions for getting a handle on your debt. Like I mentioned before, it was a simple 20-minute phone call, and I didn't pay anything for the consultation. The advice was free, and I didn't have to accept the debt management plan if I felt like it wasn't for me, so there was no obligation. The credit counselor simply helped me look at my full financial situation and figure out the path that made the most sense for me. And aside from a debt repayment program, a credit counselor can also help with things like debt consolidation, consumer proposals, and even bankruptcy. So, in case you're unfamiliar with these, here's a quick explanation of how each of these work. So, with a debt repayment program, they negotiate with your creditors on your behalf to reduce your interest rates, preferably to 0%. With a consumer proposal, they help to negotiate a legal agreement where you pay back a portion of what you owe. With debt consolidation, they take your multiple debts and combine them into one manageable payment. And finally, if no other options are available, they can help with bankruptcy. So, no matter how deep in debt you are right now, there are options available to you. And once you know what your options are, you can start taking back control of your finances and potentially save decades of stress and keep tens of thousands of dollars in your pocket. I know it can be scary to confront your situation and to reach out and ask for help because for a long time I was scared of reaching out. The truth is, I knew about credit counseling years before I ever made the call. It was something that my mom had done when I was younger, but there was three big fears that kept me from taking action. First, I was afraid that it was going to negatively impact my credit score. And honestly, my credit score did take a hit. I lost about 140 points because I had to stop using the credit cards that I had. But this didn't end up being the big catastrophe that I had built up in my head because I was still able to open a secured credit card while I was in my debt repayment program and start building up my credit score again. So even though it did lower my credit score, it was only a temporary setback. Second, I was afraid that if I took the easy way out, I would end up back in debt again later on. And I know it might sound strange, but I was really punishing myself for getting to this point with my debt. I used to be really good with money, but once I started college, my financial decision making took a nosedive. And I was so angry at myself for it. Part of me felt like I didn't deserve help, and like making it easier on myself was letting myself off the hook. But looking back at this, it was such a backwards way of looking at things. Instead of focusing on punishing myself so I don't make this mistake again, I should have been focusing more on the solution and getting myself out of this hole that I dug. This was something that didn't really click for me until a friend of mine confronted my negative way of thinking. So, in case you don't have a friend like that to knock some sense into you, I'm going to do my best to fill that role. And third, I was scared to live without credit as a backup because back then I had no savings, I had no backup plan. I was living paycheck to paycheck, and my credit card was the only thing standing between me and disaster if something went wrong and if I had an unexpected vet bill or car repair that I needed. So, without that safety net, I genuinely didn't know what I would do. But I did know that if I kept going the way that I was never going to get ahead and build a life that I was actually proud of. So, as scary as it was, I had to just take the leap and trust that I would figure things out as they came up. And eventually, I did end up starting an emergency fund. So, if any of these fears feel familiar to you, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And just because you reach out to see what your options are, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you have to commit to anything right away. I also want to mention that once I was in my debt repayment program and I had that 0% interest rates on my debt, my first instinct was to throw every extra dollar that I had towards paying it down to kill that debt faster. But a friend of mine pointed out that By paying 0% interest, it's basically like having a free loan. So if instead of trying to put every extra dollar towards paying down my debt that wasn't really costing me anything, if instead I put that money into investments and earned, say, 7% on that money instead, by the time my debt repayment ended, I would be coming out ahead. So that's just something to think about if you happen to find yourself in the same situation. Two things I would tell anyone who's trying to stay out of debt are one, build an emergency fund. This is what I didn't have the first time around, and it's exactly why credit felt like my only safety net. And by having that money set aside, I'm no longer one unexpected vet bill or car repair away from reaching towards credit to save me again. And two, I would say focus on becoming financially literate. And I don't mean become an expert in economics or anything like that. I just mean develop an understanding of how things like interest and credit and debt and investing actually work, because having that basic knowledge is what has allowed me to get to the place I am right now where I'm doing so much better financially and I'm not struggling all the time. So, to end off, if you're currently where I used to be, knowing that help exists, but feeling too scared or proud to reach out and ask for help, I get it. As I mentioned, I used to be afraid to reach out and ask for help, but all of my fears and objections ended up being a lot more manageable than I expected. And waiting cost me more than getting help ever did. So let me know in the comments where you're at in your journey. And if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.